Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we are here today with lesson number 62 in our incredible tutorial series where you are learning artificial intelligence on the Jetson Nano. I will need you to pour yourself a nice, enormous mug of iced coffee. That would be strong black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweetener, none needed. I will also need you to get out your Jetson Nano gear, and as you are getting out your gear, as always, I'm going to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, think about looking down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what we are going to learn today. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very exciting lesson because today we are going to learn how to take a Raspberry Pi Zero and turn it into a streaming IP camera. And I have to tell you, this turned out to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I've spent the last couple of months trying to figure out how to get this thing to work the way that I want it to work. The good news is I have it figured out, and now that I know how to do it, I can show you how to do it. So you will need to get some gear together. Hopefully you already have a Raspberry Pi and a Pi camera. You don't have to use the Zero. If you have a Pi 3 laying around with a camera, this lesson should work on that as well. If you want the really neat implementation that I have links down in the description. What I did was I went ahead and got the Raspberry Pi Zero kit, and what the kit is under $30, but it comes with the Raspberry Pi Zero. It comes with the cool case, and it comes with all the little cables and connectors and power supply that you need to get the Raspberry Pi Zero booted up and connected to your screen and your keyboard. Now what we're going to be doing is today we're going to be getting it where we can SSH into it. So after the first boot, we won't have to connect to the screen and keyboard anymore. But it's nice to have the cable. So if you ever do need to connect, you have everything that you need. What I also will be using is a remote power supply because I don't want to be connected to the wall with a wall wart. And I really like this little USB power bank. And I like it because it will run the Raspberry Pi Zero and the camera for a couple of hours, and you can see with the rubber band on there, you have this completely mobile system with no wires, no connectors, and you can put it wherever you want. For today's demonstration, I have this monster power bank, and this one you could probably run your Raspberry Pi Zero all day on it. But I'll be using it because I don't want to get in the middle of this lesson and have the power go down on the Pi. So for safety, I will be using the very big power supply. But this is kind of the neat, elegant one. Like I say, links to all this cool stuff down in the description, but hopefully you have what you need to kind of demo this thing. So let's see, that's a lot of talking that I've been doing. I think we are ready to get ready here to boot this thing up. Now, what I will say is that in today's lesson, I will not be taking you through downloading noobs. That by lesson number 62, you ought to be able to flash an operating system by yourself. The instructions are very clear on the Raspberry Pi website. What you need to do is you need to format your micro SD card using SD card formatter. You then need to download noobs. You need to extract the operating system from the zip folder, and then you need to flash it over to the SD card. And then the first time you boot, it will take about 30 minutes to configure the operating system. You can do all that on your own. So what I am showing you is kind of like the first boot after you have the operating system installed. And so let me make sure that you have exceptional focus here. And let me get out of your way, and let's see here. I just want to make sure that you really have a good focus. And what I have found is it's better to just take a second and focus it than to fight the whole video with the not not so great working autofocus on the camera. Okay, that looks good. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take this little short cord, or what I'm going to do first of all is to take the dongle, the little USB dongle, and I have my wireless keyboard and wireless mouse little unit plugged in there, and now I'm going to plug this into the Raspberry Pi, and that plugs into this center connector, and as such, with the wide part of it up. Okay, that's in. And now I'm going to get my HDMI cable, and it does in fact take a mini HDMI, not the micro. It's kind of like that odd size mini one, and I'm going to plug that in. All right, so I should have the keyboard, and I should have the display. Now we are getting ready to put power on, and that goes to the outside connector. And now I'm going to bring it into the power bank. But before doing that, I will go ahead and I will plug the HDMI cable into my studio so you can hopefully then see the Raspberry Pi as we boot. Okay, so I will come to that view, and it's not plugged in yet, so you can't see any booting action happening, but now I'm going to plug this into the power bank, and hopefully we should see some action here fairly shortly. We are plugged in, we have the cable plugged in, and then finally you've got to turn the power bank on. So there is usually a little button on the back side, so I'll just click that, and boom, we got the happy little rainbow screen. And so that is always wonderful to see that we are getting the happy little rainbow screen, and now we are getting the happy little Raspberry Pi. So we're well on our way to booting. Never fear, you kind of lose the video signal for a second while it's booting, but everything should be okay. Got the nice little Raspberry. We should be booted here in no time. Actually, I guess I should be honest and say the Pi Zero is a slow booting machine, a painfully slow machine, but it'll be booted here in no time. We'll just sit and chat while we're waiting. Got the splash screen. And guys, I'm running 3 keyboards. I've got my studio keyboard, the Jetson Nano keyboard, and the Raspberry Pi keyboard. And so you can imagine before this show is over, I'm going to probably be typing in the wrong keyboard more than one time. But we are happy that we have the Raspberry Pi splash screen. We should see the desktop here in any second now. I see that. Boom. All right. We have booted the Raspberry Pi Zero. All right. So what I will need to do is give it a second to finish booting. The desktop is coming to life. Okay. I need you to open up a terminal. Okay. I need you to open up a terminal. And the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to configure our wireless network. Okay. And the way we are going to do that is we are going to come in here, and we need to do a sudo, and we need to do a rasp config, sudo rasp config, like that. Okay, and there's going to be several things that we need to do here. There's going to be several things that we need to do. You've already set up your password on your first boot like I did. You need to come down to the second one, network options, and then what you need to do is the second one, into wireless LAN. Okay, you've got to set it up wirelessly. And so what you do is you put in the name of your Wi-Fi network. Don't put in the name of my Wi-Fi network. Put in the name of your Wi-Fi network. My Wi-Fi network is Eagle Air, and then I press the down arrow key, enter for OK, and it wants my password. Okay, and again, use your password. I have to be very mindful not to sound out my password as I'm putting it in with my mouth. Okay, now when I look in the upper right screen, I can see that it's trying to connect to that network, and it does in fact look like I successfully connected to the network. So the network is done. That's good. Now you need to come down to interfacing options number 5, and you need to select that, and you need to enable the camera. So P1 there, camera, you can see I've got it in red. I'm going to enter. And it says, would you like your camera interface to be enabled? I am over yes. I'm over the red over yes. And so I will click enter, yes, please. It says the camera interface is enabled. That's good. Click enter for OK. Come back to number 5, interfacing options, enter again, and you need to go to the second one, SSH. We need to enable SSH so we can SSH in and get rid of this keyboard and this screen. Would you like the SSH server to be enabled? You see I'm over yes. I click enter and boom. Takes a second. I said boom too quickly, but I am confident this is going to be okay. Takes a second to turn on SSH. SSH enabled. I will click OK. And now I am done with Rtp config. So I will come down to finish and click enter. And that looks good. Sometimes it might bug you for a reboot. And if it bugs you for a reboot, just do a reboot. Now what you need to do is you need to get your IP address of the Pi. And you do that with the command ifconfig. Okay, ifconfig. And what you can see is you can see that my IP address down here, the WLAN, okay, the wireless LAN IP address is 10.1.37.31. Yours will be different. You need to write down what your IP address is. Now, this is what you should do. And you just got to kind of figure out how to do this. You need to try to make this a reserved IP address, a dedicated IP address. You would do that by going to your router. You would type in like the IP address of your router. You would open up your router, and then you would try to reserve this as a dedicated IP address for the Raspberry Pi Zero. Now, there's a million different routers and a million different networks, so I can't show you how to do that. Look at the manual or ask somebody who can help you, but what you want is a dedicated IP address on your Wi-Fi network. Okay, I am at work, so I had to go to my IT guy, and he hooked me up with a dedicated IP address. And the reason to do that is it's just if you come in next week, you would like to have the same IP address so that you don't have to go back in and hook the keyboard up again. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. I think that is, in fact, what we need to do. Now, I'm going to try to unplug the keyboard and unplug the screen without crashing the Pi. Sometimes unplugging that crashes the Pi. I don't know if it's because because the USB is so close to the power, maybe you jiggle the power, but I'm going to try to unplug this without crashing it. So let's see here. Hey, I think I did that. Now I'm going to unplug the screen. And of course, once I unplug the screen, you can't see it because it's not plugged in. That should make sense. And we will plug you back into the Jetson Nano. Okay, now what you can see is that now we are operating completely wirelessly. And with a little luck, the sucker is still booted up, but we hope that. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to see if we can connect to the Pi from the Jetson Nano. So I am going to find a good mouse here. All right, and now what I will do is I will open up a terminal, and now I want to ping and see if I can ping the Pi from the Jetson Nano. So I will say ping. And as I promised, I had the wrong keyboard, but we will recover. Ping. And then what did we say? My IP was 10.1.37.31. You will put in your IP address. All right, let's see. And you can see that we're pinging. We're getting a response back. So the Nano is talking to the Pi. That's good. Control-C should kill that. Now what we got to see is, can we connect? Can we putty in, or can we SSH into the Raspberry Pi? And you can do that by coming up to your start button up here and then search on SSH, and you can see you have this program Ramina Remote Desktop Client. Let's click on that, and that comes up here. All right, and now you need to come to this little plus sign here, this little plus sign, and click on plus. And then, very important, under protocol, you need to come down and set that to SSH Secure Shell. That is the protocol we're using to connect. Then you come and under server, you put in your IP address, im10.1.37.31. No matter how many times I tell you, someone out there, don't be the guy who puts in my IP address instead of your IP address. This is my IP address. You need to use your IP address, okay? Now, what is your Raspberry Pi username? Mine is Pi. And then you should have, on first boot, set up a password. Use your password. Okay, and then I have that. I've got the IP address, I've got my username, I've got my password. I should be able to say connect now with a little luck. With a little luck. Boom! We are connected here. You see I have this window here? All right, man, I am connected to the Raspberry Pi from the Jetson Nano. And the really cool thing now is that you see I am completely remote. No wires, no cables, just power. And so that is a huge step forward. Now what we need to do is we need to get this puppy ready to stream video over the network. And so the first thing we're going to need to do is put GStreamer on the Raspberry Pi, because like in OpenCV we use GStreamer to launch the camera. Well, we're going to use GStreamer on the Raspberry Pi to launch the camera. So I need you to do a sudo and then apt apt.get sudo apt-get install, and then GStreamer 1.0 dash tools. Okay, GStreamer 1.0 dash tools. I think you can read that. And so let's hit enter. I think I hit shift. There it goes. Okay, it's going. GStreamer installs pretty quickly, so we'll just sit and chat while that is. Okay. Done. Okay. That looks like that is all done, so that is most excellent. All right, so I think that we are ready to try and launch. I'm just a little hesitant. I want to make sure that there's nothing else that I need to do. I think we're ready to try to launch the camera on the Raspberry Pi from the Jetson Nano. Okay, so what I need you to do is get the GStreamer command. And this is a hard one to type in, so I'm going to let you copy and paste it, and then we'll kind of talk you through it. All right, so you need to come to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and you need to go to AI on the Jetson Nano lesson 62, and then I have two different GStreamer commands. This first one is if you have the Raspberry Pi version 1 camera. This second one is if you have the Raspberry Pi version 2 camera. And the difference is in the resolution. It's kind of like you really need to give it a resolution that the camera knows. And so this is the resolution that we're using for the version 1 camera, and the version 2 camera is a little bit different. So we're going to click here. We're going to click on the two little icons. I'm going to Control-C to copy it. And then I'm going to come back to my SSH session. Okay, and I'm going to hope that I can paste this in here. And so I'm going to say paste. And there it is. And so before we run it, let's talk through it. The first command is Rtp video. This is a command that is going to launch the camera. The -t space 0, that is just saying don't do it for a certain amount of time, just let it run indefinitely. So 0 means just keep running until it's killed. Then I've got the width that I'm setting to 1296 because I am on the Raspberry Pi version 1 camera. I'm setting a height of 730, frames per second of 30, a great old big bit rate. That looks like, what is that, like 20 it looks like it's a bit rate of 2 million. It's hard to count those zeros without a comma. And then the minus AWB means auto white balance, and I want to set that to auto. And then the dash N, the minus N, that means don't put the image on the Raspberry Pi screen, because that would just take a lot of processing power, and the Raspberry Pi is not even hooked up to a screen, so don't show the image on the Raspberry Pi screen. That's the minus N. Now the minus O means output. Now where do we want to take the output? Well, we put the dash and then we say pipe it. That vertical bar is the pipe. Pipe it to GStreamer, because we're going to pipe it to a launch of GST, and then we tell GStreamer to get the video source from the FD source. That's that source that just launched it. That's that Raspy Vid thing that we just launched. And then we've got to do some parsing and some manipulation of the video stream to get it streaming over the internet. We have to do an H.264 parse. Then we've got to do an RTP H.264 pay. What this is doing is it's setting up an RTP server. So we're going to RTP the video frames. Why RTP instead of RTSP? Well, what I found is that RTP you can get to work with no latency. And if we're going to be wanting to do things in real time, we don't want latency. Now we can deal with dropped frames. Like if we get a bad connection and start dropping frames, that's okay. But the RTSP seems to buffer frames and we get like a second or two latency. That's why we're using RTP. Then we do a config interval of 1, PT is 96, then we do a GDP pay, and then here we are launching the TCP string. So we do a TCP Server Sync, and since this is kind of like the Raspberry Pi is itself, we have the host is 0.0.0.0, but this is important. We are putting it on a port of 8554. Now over on the Jetson Nano side, we got to remember that. We got to remember that we are on port 8554. Now when we hit enter, what we hope to see is it's probably going to pause for a second, look like it's locked up, and then we just want to see a bunch of garbage come, and then we want to see it say something like streaming. Okay, but there's going to be a bunch of nonsense, and then it should look like it is working. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And it is thinking there for a second. Boom, you see all those things that came up, and then it says new clock, GST system clock. I think that means that this thing is working at this point. I think we just launched the Raspberry Pi camera from the Jetson Nano. Okay, now let's see if we can actually see the camera. So I am going to minimize our terminal, and then we are going to come over and we are going to launch a fresh new Visual Studio Code. We are going to come over. We are working in the NVIDIA folder, and I am going to add a new program to the NVIDIA folder, and it is going to be Deep Learning 12.py. The .py is kind of important, and I will get the navigator view out of your way there, and I think I can bring this on over, make it a little bit easier for you to see. Okay, now we need to go back to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and we want to search on Jetson Nano camera. Okay, and we want to find that program that just sort of launches a camera in OpenCV, just to kind of give us a head start. And that was down here, starting the Raspberry Pi camera on a web or a web camera on the Jetson Nano. That is the one we want. I will click on that. We've only come to this page like a million times already. And then here is our little program that will launch a Raspberry Pi camera. So I'm going to click, right mouse click, copy, come over here, paste. Okay, and let's just test this to make sure that it still works. And so what I will do is I will uncomment out the cam set and uncomment out the cam. All right. And so this is not going to be launching the Raspberry Pi camera, which is already running. It's just going to launch the camera that's hooked to the Nano just to see if the program is working. And I do believe we should put in a move window here. So we will do a cv2.move. It's amazing how my IntelliSense just took a second to wake up, but it is working today. And what do we want to move? We want to move Nano Cam. And where do we want to move it? I want to move it to 0, 0. And so this is just to see if the world is what it should be, and this should run no problem. I hope it runs. What do we do there? Okay, there it is. Okay, boom. It's a little slow firing up today, but good latency. So anyway, the world is as it should be. I'll quit out of that. Okay, now the thing is, I don't want to launch the local Raspberry Pi camera on the Jetson Nano. I want to launch the remote camera. So what we need is we need a different cam set. And we need a cam set that doesn't get the NVIDIA Argus camera source, the local camera. We need a cam set that will get the remote camera. So let's copy and paste that command, and then I'll kind of go through it and explain it. So we need to go back to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and we need to go back again to this AI on the Jetson Nano lesson 62, and we need to get this cam set command down here. It's kind of like the third thing in this lesson. Okay, and so I am going to select the icons, control copy. I am going to come over here and I'm going to replace that cam set with my new one. So I will control V to put it in, pull it back where you can see it. And then it is going to be cam set, not cam set 2. So I will need to backspace over that. And I think, I think I copied over a command. So let me undo my camera launch. Yeah, I copied over my camera launch. So let me try again. Okay, now I think that's right. I've got cam set and then cam calls can set. So here, instead of the NVIDIA Argus camera, my source, my SRC, I've got TCP client source. And now I've got to tell it where the Raspberry Pi camera is. Well, remember when we did the IF config, what did it say? My IP address was 10.1.37.31. Don't use my IP address. Use your IP address. We got it earlier. Remember IF config? You've got to use your IP address. And then remember we were on port 8554, and now we've got to kind of deal with that stream. So these are just different parameters that GStreamer wants. We're going to do a GDP DEPay. We're going to do an RTP, right? We're streaming the data with RTP, and then we are going to do a 264 DPay. That's the compression, the H.264 compression. We are dealing with that, and then we are going to parse the data that is coming in with H.264, and then we are going to do the NVIDIA 4L2 decoder. Okay, then we're going to do an NVIDIA convert to get things the right size that we want. And then we're going to need a flip method. So I've got flip is 2. I'm going to go ahead and put flip 0 because the camera is not upside down now. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to set this to those dimensions that I launched the camera at. And for me, those dimensions. I will have to go back and look just to make sure that I get them right. I did 1296 and 730. So I'm going to set that here, 1296 and 730. And it's just a good idea to be reading the frames at the same resolution that you launched them at. If you were using the Raspberry Pi 2 camera, I think you'd use 1280 by 720 in both places. Okay, guys, this is kind of scary. Are we really ready to try to run this? What is the chance that I haven't forgotten something really important? But we are going to right mouse click and we are going to run Python file in terminal. Okay, I got an error. What did we do wrong here? Oh, I think when I know what I did. When I pasted that, I ended up with this camera. Remember how that camera command disappeared? I didn't erase it. It was just on the end. It was on the end of this string. So hopefully you didn't make that mistake. Okay, do you see that cam equals cv2.video capture? And then I re-put that, so I don't need it. Does that make sense? Right there, that close quote after sync equal false is the end of my gstreamer command. And then I come down here with the cam to launch it. So now let's try that. Run Python file in terminal. Let's see. Whoa, what did it not like? Okay, let's make sure I got my IP address right, 10.1.37.31. That looks good. Let's look down here. NanoCam frame, reading from cam, video capture, cam set. Okay, let's make sure that the Raspberry Pi is still alive. And so one way you could get this is if the Raspberry Pi was not running. And so let's see if we can still ping it. So I'm going to say ping 10.1.37.31. Because if we jiggled the cord, it is possible that the Raspberry Pi died. Okay, and you see how I'm not able to ping the Raspberry Pi? And so what might have happened is this thing might have died when I was messing around and moving it around. Okay, no, it is now showing life. Okay, so that is showing that I am pinging it. So I will Control C. So I know that I'm talking to it. So I will come over here and I will try to run this again. Okay, boom. Look at that. Streaming wirelessly. Yes, sir. Look at that. Let's check our latency. I'll do a selfie here. Okay, there we go. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you see that? There is virtually no latency. Less than 1/10 of a second latency on that. We are completely wireless. Also, guys, I want you to understand this putty session that we had. This putty session that we had earlier, the only reason for that putty session was just to launch the camera. We don't need that. We can kill the putty session. We don't need that anymore. Well, I said that, but let's see. I killed it. Let's try it again. Right mouse click, run Python file in terminal. I got too much going all at once there. Okay, there it is. Okay, so you see I don't have any SSH into it. It is just that GStreamer command is the only thing that is making this go. You see, I am completely mobile, guys. Do you see that? I am completely mobile, no wires. And if we had this connected to this little thing for the battery, the whole thing would be even smaller. But let me just show you how mobile I am. I am going to walk around the room and you're going to be able to see me streaming. You won't hear me, but you'll see what I'm doing. Okay, guys, did you see that? I hope it worked. I couldn't see. As I was walking. I couldn't see, but hopefully that worked. All right. I just think this is super, super, super cool. Okay, so now let's talk about a few more things. Let me see if I can hopefully get this looking at something. All right, it's looking at the ceiling, so I'll move it back over here. All right, and in fact, I think I'll quit it. So I will quit out of it. All right, so now this is what we want to do. Everything's good. Everything worked. In fact, it worked really great, and we didn't have too many mess ups along the way. We got it up and running pretty well. But now this is the thing. We don't want to have to come in every single time and connect those cables up and connect the keyboard dongle and the screen and all of that to launch the camera. So what we want it to do is we want it to launch the camera by itself when it boots up. We want it to launch the camera by itself when it boots. So all you got to do is just put power on it, and when you put power on it, it will launch the camera as the thing boots up. So we will need to come back to our SSH program. Okay, our little SSH. And that is not the one. I tried PuTTY on here, but PuTTY doesn't work very well. So we will come and we will do the Ramina remote. And as before, we're going to come and put a plus sign here. And then we are going to do a SSH secure shell. And then our IP was 10.1.37.31. Use your IP address. Don't use my IP address. And then use your username. I am Pi. And then the password. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to try that password again. Okay, and I'm going to say save and connect, and we will see if we will be able to connect. It's trying to connect. I got the IP right. Let's see. Let's go back and check the ping again. Let's see if we're able to ping it, see if it's still alive. Yep, it is still alive. So if I can ping it, I should be able to SSH to it. Let's try that again. Force quit. We'll try it one more time. Okay, we want a SSH secure shell. Okay, so I'm going to say connect here. That all looks good. Let's just be patient this time. Boom, there it is. Okay, I was just a little impatient last time. There it is. So now I am connected to the Pi from the Nano. And now what I want is I want to configure this thing to auto launch. I want to configure this thing to auto launch the Raspberry Pi on boot. So I need to come back to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com. I need to get that raspy vid command to launch the camera again. So I'm going to do a Control-C. And now I'm going to come over here, and this is where the magic is going to happen. You are going to need to type in the following: sudo nano. Now this nano is the text editor on the Raspberry Pi. So I'll do a sudo nano. What do I want to edit? The /etc/rc.local. This is a file. when this opens, you should see stuff there. If it's empty, then you didn't type it in right. You should type in /etc/rc.local, and it should open up a file. Boom, there it is. Now you need to come down, and you see after the FI, you should have like an FI here. After the FI, but before the exit 0, what I am going to do is, I don't know if I can Control V to paste. No, I cannot, but I can. Or maybe I did. Let's look. Did I paste or not? No, I didn't. Okay. So I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to say paste. Okay. And then you're just seeing the end of the line. It's a really long line. Okay. And so it doesn't fit on the screen, so it breaks it up. But you can see that we did, in fact, end up with that monster long raspy vid -t command, right? And so now what I'm going to do is to save this, you do Control X, okay? And then it says Save Modified Buffer, and then you see the little blinky. I need to put a Y for yes. Okay, and then it says File Name to Write. Yes, I like that. So now I just hit Enter like that, and now it is saved. Let's check it just to make sure. So I will sudo nano again, and then I will hit the arrow key down to come down, and there that is. So this time the Control X should just leave because I have not changed anything. So Control X will just take me all the way out. All right, now this is the moment of truth. Okay, so I am still logged on to the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to tell it to reboot. Sudo reboot now. Okay, and now it's going to kick us off. You would expect it because it's rebooting. Okay, and just a reminder, we are rebooting with it completely mobile. And we've got to kind of get some sort of indication of when it has booted. So I'll come back over here and I will begin to ping it and look for some signs of life. Initially, no signs of life. Why? Because it's rebooting. This is really fun. I hope you guys are having as much fun with this as I am. I am really having a lot of fun with this. Okay, we're still not pinging anything there. Let me try it again. Got my IP address right. Okay, yeah. I started thinking, did I do a sudo shutdown now or a sudo reboot now? And it would make a difference, because if I did a sudo shutdown, I might have to unplug it and plug it back in. But it looks like it has come to life. Okay, and now we will come back to our program here. All right, and now I'm going to right mouse click and run Python file in terminal. Hopefully it's completely rebooted now. Okay, boom! Look at that. There I am. And here we are completely mobile. We have a streaming IP camera based on the Raspberry Pi Zero W. And I think that is just really neat. Now that, my friend, that is really the hard part. But now I want you to think of all the different things we can do now that we can do this. One thing is, like, imagine making kind of like a doorbell camera. You could put this, mount it on your door. You'd need to use a proper environmental container so that you don't, it doesn't kill your camera when it rains outside, but you'd need a good environmental container. You could put this outside, and in fact, if you just brought power to it, you wouldn't have to fool with the battery. And you could have something inside your house that said, Susan is at the door, Tom is at the door, Tom and Susan are at the door, or unknown person at the door. Okay, so you could have it audibly speak, because remember last time we had this thing talking, you could have this audibly speaking who was at the door. Now, what else can I imagine with this? I can imagine doing something like having this smaller battery and hooking this thing up to like the Elegoo smart car, you know, that Elegoo smart car project that we're doing. And then we could have kind of like a first person driver where as the car drives around, we're sitting back at our computer and we can see what's in front of the car, and we can drive the car from the computer screen based on what we are seeing from the little Raspberry Pi camera. You could imagine also then having like the Raspberry Pi control where the thing is driving. So you could have like artificial intelligence over here going on the Jetson Nano, and it could be getting a signal from the smart car and the camera and making decisions like to follow someone or to follow something or doing things like that. So you see, all of a sudden we have opened up a whole lot of possibilities. But I will give you a homework assignment for tomorrow, for next week. And what that homework assignment is, the homework assignment is to get this working with the face recognizer where you can do face recognition remotely. Okay, so wherever this thing is, it is to recognize whoever face that you pointed at or whoever walks by the camera. So the homework assignment is to do remote facial recognition. Now that should be pretty easy because I've done the hard part for you and we've already done facial recognition, so putting the two of those together should be fairly straightforward. It's I think it'd be a pretty exciting little thing to do. You could also imagine, like, if it sees someone it doesn't know, it could capture their picture, and then later when you're around it could say, hey, these are people that I don't know, can you tell me who they are? And you could label them, and then over time your system could know more and more people. Okay guys, man, I had a lot of fun today. I hope you guys are having as much fun with this as I am. I am just really having fun. I like the idea of combining this with the making the Nano talk, which we did in lesson number 61. So we're getting a pretty nice little portfolio put together here. What can we do? We can send things to the GPIO pins. We can read things from the GPIO pins. We can talk, and we can now operate remotely. And I think that is some pretty cool stuff. Okay, if you guys like this lesson, give me a thumbs up. Think about this, sharing this on your social media. Share it on Facebook. Share it on Twitter. Let's see if we can get some more people involved with this exciting learning educational material. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today. This is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.